In this video, we want to implement the front end of the login page. So we will see a page like this, and when you click on the login button, you will see the validation errors. Then we go to the backend and we implement the login API. So follow this lesson if you'd like to know how. Okay, here is the roadmap for this lesson. Let's start by generating the login page component. First of all, go to the terminal menu and select new terminal. First of all, go to the front end folder. Then write ngGC for generating the component inside components folder, pages folder with the name of login-page. Then press enter. Okay, our login page component is created. Let's check it out inside the Explorer. Frontend, SRC, app components, pages, and we have our login page components folder. Now, before going inside it, we want to add it to the routes. So we can have a separate page for it. Click on app-routing module, copy the last item here, put a comma, press enter, and paste. Instead of cart page, we want to say login. And instead of cart page component, we want to say login page component. By doing this, we can have access to it inside the browser. If we click on login that we previously set it to login page, if we zoom in a little bit, we could see this login page works. So now we can go inside the login page and add everything that we want to this page. Now let's get back to the code and close the app routing module. Now we want to add the required code to the login page TypeScript file. So go to the Explorer and open up the login page component.ts file. Here, as you know, for sending the data to the server, normally we need a form. For managing the form inside the Angular, we use Angular Forms or Angular Reactive Forms. We use it because of its simplicity and flexibility. So first of all, we need to add a field here with the name of login form that is required with the type of form group. This form group should be imported from Angular Forms. So press enter. As you can see, we have form group from Angular Forms here, and that's what we want. The second field that I want to add here is submitted. That is equal to false by default. We use this as an indicator that the user pressed the submit button or not, because we don't want to show the validation errors by default until the user pressed the submit button. Now we can create a new login form by creating a new instance of this form group, but it needs much more boilerplate code. I prefer to use form builder that is also part of Angular Forms. So first of all, we need to inject it here. So go to the constructor and write private form builder with the type of form builder. Here we can go inside the engine init and build our login form. So write this.login form equal to this.form builder.group, because we want a form group and we need to pass an object to it. Here we need to define all the inputs and their validators. For defining a new input, for example, email, that is our first input, we need to write the name of it here. Then we need to pass an array as the value that its first item is the initial value or the default value that I want to be an empty string, and its second parameter is the validators that you want to add for this email. For adding validators, you just need to write validators. That also comes from Angular Forms, press enter, .required. The required validator says this field and the form is invalid when there is no value for the email. So if you keep the email empty and check the validation of the login form, it says that the email is required and it's not valid. But since the email has a special format, I also want to add the email validator for it. For having multiple validators, you need to put them inside another array. Then you can add as many validators as you want. So write validators.email as the second validator for the email. But remember, here inside the TypeScript, we don't call this email form input. We call it email form control. So anytime that we said email input or email control, we are pointing to the same thing. Okay, for the second control, I want to write password because we want to send email and the password to the server to authenticate the user. Its default value is also an empty string, and it just needs to have one validator that is required. Now we can use this login form inside our HTML file to have access to these controls. But it's a little bit hard because if you want to have access to this email control, for example, you need to write login form dot controls dot email. It's not a small thing to write, right? So instead of doing this, we can make this part as a property inside here. So write get for creating a getter, and write fc, that means form controls, and create the function, then return this.loginform.controls. Now instead of writing it like that, we can write it like fc.email. That is much simpler. So remove this. And the last thing that I want to add here right now is the submit method. It will not be functional in this lesson, but we use it for showing the values of the form controls. At the beginning of it, when the user presses the submit button, we want to set the is submitted to true. And we want to check if the login form is invalid, then it shouldn't go down, shouldn't call this part, so it should return out of the submit button. But if the login form is okay, I want to show an alert with backtick, and inside it, I want to show email that is equal to this.fc, that is our getter, that email.value. Oh, sorry, here I used contains. It should be controls. So it works without error. And for the password, I want to show the same thing, but this time fc.password.value. Here we go. So if everything is okay and there is no validation error, it should show us an alert with email and the password with the values of our controls. But there's a problem. We cannot use this login form inside the HTML file unless we import the Reactive Forms module inside our app routing module. So go to the Explorer and app module, then inside the imports part, put a comma and write Reactive Forms module. And it's coming from Angular/forms. Close the app module. We're done here. We can go to the login page component HTML file, clear everything here. First of all, let's add a div with the class of container and another div with the class of details. At the top, we want to use app-title. That is the component that we made in the previous lessons. Set its title to login and close it. Next, I want to add a form, and I need to set its form group to login form that we created inside the component. And for its ng submit, we want to call the submit method. Here we go. So we just connected our login form to this form, and anytime we click on submit button, it will call the submit method that we defined inside our component. For the first input, I want to define a div with a class of input container with the label of email, and the div inside it with an input with the type of email, placeholder of email, and form control name that is equal to its control inside the login page component TS file. So if you used another name here, use it as the form control name. I used email there, so I use email here. Then close the input. Now for the password, let's copy this and paste it at the bottom. Instead of email, write password. Its type should be password too, and its placeholder should be password with capital P. And also its form control name is password. Here we go. Now let's add the button part here. So add a div with the class of button. Inside it, add a button with the type of submit with the text of login. Let's put this form control name here so we can see everything. Now if we go to the browser, we could see that we have everything that we defined here. Now if we click on the login, we cannot see that alert. But if we write a valid email, for example, jane@gmail.com with some password, if you click on login, we could be able to see the email and the password as an alert. What does it mean? It means if the values are not valid, we are not able to see the alert, and it works perfectly. But when the form is not valid, we should see the validation errors. That's what we want to do right now. Here inside the input container, after the input div, add another div with a class of error list, then add an ngF with the value of fc.email.errors and is submitted. Then close the div. This means we only see the error list when the email has errors and the login button or submit button is clicked. Now we can show each error separately here. For the first error, write ngF fc.email.errors.required. We can see that it has a required error or not. As the text, we could say should not be empty. This error shows up when the email is empty. We need another error when the email is not in correct format. So just copy this line and paste it at the bottom. Change this required to email, and instead of should not be empty, write email is not correct. Now for the password, we can copy this error list and paste it after input div of the password. And here instead of the email, write password. Copy it, paste it here, and remove the email one because passport just has the required validator. So remember, we should have fc.password here and here. Now, if we go to the browser and click on login, we see this error message. And if we enter something here, so the email is not empty, but it is not in correct format. Now, if we write a correct email, you can see that there is no validation error. Same for the password. Now, if we click on login, we could see the email and the password as an alert. In this part, I don't want to give styles to these inputs individually because I want to make each of them a separate component in the next lesson. We do this because we need them in so many pages inside this project. But let's add some general styles to the login page. Let's get back to the code. Then from here, select login page component CSS. And for its container, add a display of flex. Its justify content should be center. Align items center. Height 100%. And its margin top should be 3 rem. For the details class, its width should be 28 rem. And for the form, its display should be flex. Its flex direction should be column. And its justify content should be center. Now if we look at the browser, as you can see, we have them a little bit near to the center, but it will be much more beautiful if we make them as separate components. Okay. For this lesson, our job is done with the front end. Let's get back to the code and close everything related to the login page. Now we want to add the login API. Okay, let's first of all go to the backend folder, src folder, and select the server.ts. Here after the last API, let's add another API. Write app.post, and the post is the HTTP method. By having the post method, we can send the body to the server, and inside that body, we will send the username and password for authenticating the user. Its address should be /API/users/login, and for its request and response, we need to have this function. Here I want to define a constant, const body, that is equal to request.body. And this is the body that we send to the server as JSON. But Express doesn't support JSON by default. You need to enable it. So you just need to go up after the line that you define your Express app. You need to write app.useExpress.json. Now you can get requests with JSON body inside your APIs. So scroll down inside here. Now we need to find the user based on the email and password inside the body. But we don't have any database. So for now, let's add some sample users to the data.ts. So from the Explorer, open data.ts on the same folder, and at the end of the file, add these two users with the name of sample users that you can write by yourself or you can find inside the commit link in the description below. Now we can use these sample users and we give it the type of any because we didn't define any models inside the server. Close the data.ts and inside the login API press enter and write const user is equal to. We need to find the user from the sample underline users that will be add from the data.ts dot find the user when the user dot email is equal to body.email and user.password is equal to body.password. But currently there's a cool way in JavaScript that we can destructure the items inside the body and put it inside separate variables. So we can write const and put an object here. We can write email and password is equal to request.body. By doing this, the email inside the body will be put inside this variable and the password inside the body will be put inside this variable. So here instead of writing body.email we can write email and instead of body.password we can write password. Then we can remove this line. This is what we call destructuring assignment. So we destructure the body and we put it inside separate variables. We can do the same thing with arrays, but I will tell you about it when we get there. Now at the next line, we need to check if the user is available and not null or undefined. Then we need to send a successful response to the client that contains the user and the token value. User, that is this user. A token is an encrypted text that will be sent to the client and need to be saved there. So the client should send it with each request. Then the server could decrypt it and understand which user are doing that request. In other words, for authentication and authorization. So let's create a function for generating the token response. At the bottom of the API, write const generate token response and get the user with the type of any as the input parameter. Here for generating the token, we want to use JWT or JSON Web Token library that is very popular on handling the tokens. But we need to install it. So let's install it here. From the terminal menu, select new terminal, then go to the backend folder this time and write npm install JSON Web Token. Look at the spells and press enter. Okay, it is installed. Close the terminal, go to the top, then import it here. Write import JWT from JSON Web Token. As you can see, we have the same error just like before. For fixing this error, press Ctrl dot and select install @types / JSON Web Token. And this error will go away after a couple of seconds. So let's go down inside the generate token response function and write const token is equal to jwt.sign. The process of generating token is called signing. The first parameter is the payload or what we wanna encode. For now, we just want to encode the email of the user that comes from the user.email and is admin property comes from user.isAdmin. For the second parameter, we need to pass a secret or private key. Normally, this private key should be kept securely inside the env file, but for now, I just want to write some random text. You can write anything you want, but it is very important because everybody that has the secret could decode your token. And the last parameter of the sign function is options. The only options that we want to set is expire time. That will be set using expires in. We set it to 30 days. So this token that will be generated using this function will be expired in 30 days. Now that we have the token, we can set user.token equal to token. Then we need to return the user. Oh, we need to use arrow function here. Here we go. Now we can use this function inside response.send with the value of the user that we found based on the email and the password from the client. This was the happy part. Let's add the unhappy part when the user is not found. So let's put an else here and let's send a response with a status of 400, that is a bad request, and send with the text of username or password is not valid. So this error should be shown when the user is not valid. Okay, our API is generated. Let's test it inside the Postman. Inside the Postman, close this notification, then click on this plus for creating a new collection. Set its name to FoodMine. Now we can put all the requests related to the FoodMine project inside this collection. Right-click on this collection and select Add Request. Set its name to login. Its type should be post and its request URL should be localhost 5000/API/users/login. Okay, we just set the request URL. Now it's time for sending email and password to the server. So come over to the body and select raw and click on this drop down that is set on text and set it to JSON. Now here we need to create a JSON that contained email and password. So create a JSON object. Let's zoom in a little bit. Drag this to the left to close it and write email with the value of jane@gmail.com and password with the value of 12345. This is the password that we set inside the data.ts on the server. Now click on send. And as you can see, we have the user details plus the token that we generated on the server. Okay, we created the login API successfully, but we didn't connect our front end to this API. That's what we want to do on the next part of this lesson. You've been watching Code with Nasir, and I hope to see you next time.